Welcome to Down in SA, aka Down in San Antonio, Texas, that is. Here you will be a part of the lives of the cool kids who grew up here in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. From the music, culture, society, Big Red, Hippo sodas, and breakfast tacos, you will learn the cool elements of our hidden society. So grab a long neck or a shot of tequila, light up a doobie, and say, screw the Alamo. This is who we really are, the cool kids down in SA. I'd like to welcome our audience back to Down in SA. My name is Chick. This is part 2 with ex-KMOL Sportscaster Pete Delgado. So we're going to pick up the conversation here, Pete. So you come into the market. You're the lead sportscaster. Who are the other lead sportscasters from the other TV stations? At that point, I guess it was just KSAT and Ken's, right?
Right. Well, Greg Simmons was a few years into being there. He'd been at the station, from what I understand, for several years. I think started as an intern there, worked his way up, and eventually became the sports director. He and I had an unusual relationship because we didn't have one. My first or second day at the station was the first time I saw him. I saw him on the air, and they had recorded. We would record the other two sportscasts to see what they did compared to what we did on that day. So I made a comment. Greg was not Cary Grant. And, I said, wow, look at those lips. They should have a hook in them. Well, ha, in the office. Well, unbeknownst to me, there was a photographer from KSAT standing outside the sports office, picking up a tape, a pool tape from a trial or something. He heard me say that and immediately went and told Greg, this is what the new guy said about you. I heard it. Well, Greg was very good friends with Deborah Daniels. They had worked together. He called Don Harris, what's with your guy, whatever. And it's like, I don't know, whatever. Well, Greg and I never spoke. We never spoke. So there were times where we were doing live shots 5 feet apart, and we never spoke to each other. So, that was just, we just agreed to just be that way. So that's how that was. And now Dan Cook was at Ken's, and obviously he was a legend. That was one of the first things they talked about. Like, hey, you're going up against a guy that's a legend. Dan, of course, wrote for the Express News as a sports writer. Well loved, well read. He was just, Mr. Broadhind was his alter ego that he was Dan Cook was able to maybe put out a controversial point, but it was in an interview with Mr. Broadhind. Mr. Broadhind said it, right? A fictional guy. But Dan could get his controversial opinion out there without putting it on himself, very, very clever. So there he was at Ken's. Now, a lot of folks don't know Ken stands for Express News Service. The newspaper was the Express News, So, he did that. He was definitely not flashy in any way, very monotone, but people loved him. He was known for the phrase, it's not over till the fat lady sings. He actually said on the air, which would get people fired today, made a reference to the LPGA saying they were dykes in spikes. What?
That was Dan Cook.
Yeah, Dan can get away with that, What Dan was not known for was actually going out and covering events. He never went to a Spurs game. He never went to a Missions game. I never saw him until, I'm into the job maybe, 6-7 months into it. I'm out. I'm seeing Greg. I'm seeing other people, out of these things. But I was at the Texas OU football game at the Cotton Bowl. And the way he got up into the press box, at least the way I went, he had to go up a little spiral staircase that was like from the stands that went up into the press box. And I was going up, I'm looking at my feet, and evidently Dan Cook's coming down the other way looking at his feet, and we literally run into each other. And it was kind of like a hey, and, that was about it. And then maybe a year or so later, we had a big boxing event at the Alamo Dome. Pernell Whitaker, Julio Cesar Chavez were the headliners, and Dan went to that. And I spoke with him for a long time. That was the one, maybe the only conversation. Very cordial man, intelligent, and boy, did he love boxing. So, yeah, those were the two guys in town when I showed up.
Yeah, that was his main deal because he had gone back as far as seeing Cassius Clay, Alex Arguello, who else was there? Carlos Palomino, because my uncle, Lefty Saldana, he was a fireman at Station Number 1, was a lifeguard at the Roosevelt Pool, and he was co-owner with Stefania Balzarelli's father. Now, Stefania, everyone remembers her. She had known as on St. Mary's. Well, her father and my uncle, Lefty Saldana, they were co-owners of the Golden Gloves. Oh. And the Golden Gloves is, it's still a vacant shell of a building on St. Mary's, across from the little Catholic church there, right next door, I believe, to the Drury or the Holiday Inn. I don't think anybody has still leased that space, but that's where the Golden Gloves were. And my uncle and aunt lived in Lavaca, which was like a street over from Hemisphere. A lot of my cousins lived in King William area, and my cousins boxed. They boxed at Municipal Auditorium. And so Dan Cook was always there. You know, my uncle would say, hey, Cassius Clay's going to be here over the weekend. Oh, really? And these boxers would come box there because of the humidity and the heat. That's where they would get their workout. And that's when he became hey, he would get a lot of inside storytelling for his articles in boxing. And nationwide, they picked him up because he could get to these boxers where there wasn't a lot of people around him, right? And so, here he is, right, publishing in the Express News. And the interesting thing about Dan Cook and the late Joe Sweeney, who was the anchor before George McKenzie at Channel 4, is they both owned a bar.
Right.
The newsroom was Joe Sweeney's, and Time Out was Dan Cook's, which was kind of unheard of at that time because it's like, wait a minute, you two guys are like, sports directors and you own bars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, they had, and Time Out was like right up the road from where I grew up, the Time Out Lounge and the newsroom. I mean, so like, they were, at that point I wasn't old enough to drink, although I was like any other teenager. I was still sneaking a drink somewhere. But yeah, they both own bars. And so, there's just a lot of uniqueness in the people that worked in the media in those 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then you like intersecting with them. What about storytelling, like great moments of people that you didn't expect to meet? Well, you know what? Let's go back into boxing and tell me about Jesse James Leija, because he was just a cub getting into the boxing world, and you kind of followed him through his whole career, right?
His career was very young when I came. The TV station arranged for some local sports personalities to shoot some little promotions with me, like kind of welcome me to town. George Gervin was one of them, things like that. And one of them was Jesse James Leija, who, I was told was, an up-and-coming and an exciting boxing figure in San Antonio, but I had never heard of him. But a very sweet, nice young man with a pretty young wife, and his career was masterly directed by his manager, Lester Bedford. And, Lester brought him along slow. He was a good-looking kid, a good boxer, strong. For a guy his size, who was, weighing 130 pounds, he eventually fought Azuma Nelson on that same card at the Alamo.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he fought Azuma Nelson, who was the world champion, and gave Azuma everything he wanted. I believe it ended in a draw. Leija would later on fight him again and would win. And got to champion. I think he won the world 3 different times. So, One of the things about James is, and Lester was telling me this, many an athlete makes the money and blows it all and, ends up being that. No, James put money away, bought some real estate. I know he's got a gym, in town still. He trains people like you and me who, want to just get in shape, not fight anybody.
Right.
But, he does a boxing type regiment.
Yeah.
He's got people of all ages in there. He was involved for a little bit also in some local boxing promotions. But James is doing great, still looking great. He's still in pretty good shape. I'm friends with him on Facebook. He doesn't mind taking his shirt off, It's just something, I do mind. So,
Right.
But,
right.
Yeah, no. James, that was something else. And of course, one of San Antonio's favorite ever athletes.
So let's get into, and we don't want to leave anybody in SA hanging without knowing about high school football, because that is like the preeminent of, any medium, large, or small town in Texas, whether you live in Dallas or whether you live in Tyler, or whether you live in Paris, Texas. It's all about Friday Night Lights. And so I remember that would be all hands on deck. I remember we didn't want to enter the newsroom with you guys just tearing at it, just rolling through tapes and queuing up stuff and everybody writing and everybody looking it over. And I think you guys got like the biggest block for the rundown because it was Friday night. And I think eventually it became a 30-minute show after the initial newscast. But I remember there was this Sky News 4. And so tell us about Sky News 4 and tell us why you never flew on it.
Yeah. Well, I worked in other towns, in high school football, on Friday night was, something that was going on. And I come to Texas and I'm going, wow, this is a totally different thing. 500 kids are involved in a Friday night football game, from the little, from the cheerleaders on the field, the band, the flag girls, the little song girls in the stands, the whole school gets involved. All the kids come out, 8,000 people, watching a high school football game. Other places I'd go, there'd be 200, something like that. Well, yes, and our show, Friday Night Fever, which was an extended sportscast, and we covered a whole lot of high school games. And the television station had a relationship with Mission Funeral Homes, which gave us access to their helicopter and also their little plane. So, yes, we would fly that helicopter. We'd put a photographer in there, and he'd fly over the stadium. And, Don would mimic Brent Musburger and going, you're looking live, as we'd be circling Northside Stadium or something like that, right? We'd have that shot. We had an aerial shot of that.
Yeah, that was pre-drone era.
Yeah, right, And, the station management wanted me to go up in that helicopter and do shots. And I'm like, no. Those things fall out of the sky sometime. I didn't like putting up the Christmas lights, let alone being up in that helicopter, But, so I never did it. I was not a fan favorite among management for not wanting to do it. But, it was just something that kind of spooked me, which, brought me to this other situation where one year Cowboys were in the playoffs. They were always in the playoffs that whole time I was there. And had a Southwest flight to Love Field to go cover the playoff game on a Sunday morning. I overslept. The photographer's calling me from the airport saying, hey, where are you? We're missing our flight. Well, we did miss the flight. So the station made an arrangement to use the little airplane that the funeral home had for transporting bodies, I suppose. And they put us in that thing. There was one seat for the pilot and two little jump seats that folded down on the side. You get on a plane and they do, all the safety procedures, and you're not listening to it. You're looking at your phone. I listened to every word that guy said. He also went over the safety procedures. I mean, I'm scared to death. I didn't want to be in the helicopter. I didn't want to be on that thing. And I remember when he was trying to start the engines. It was a prop plane, one prop on each wing, and he couldn't get it to start. And we're like looking at each other, me and looking at the photographer, like, what is this? It's just going, poof, right? It eventually, that gets started, the other one fires up, and we went, and we took off at such an angle, and that plane is small, and we're bouncing. He made a turn at one point where I was on the right side of the plane, but I could see out and see the ground out of the window on the left. He was essentially, was banking like that. It was one of the most terrifying things. I think it was probably an hour and a half flight or something, in that little plane that was probably going 120 miles an hour. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I never missed a flight after that.
So tell me about celebrities. Well, you know what I remember is that you were a celebrity. I remember going to events with you, and people wanted to take a picture with you, and they wanted to take an autograph with you. I mean, it was, and I don't remember that. Like for sure with Dan Cook, he never really came out of the cave, and with Greg Simmons, I just don't know. But you became, quite a headliner in sports. Were your ratings better than anybody else's when it came to the sports ratings?
I don't know. I mean, KMOL was always in third, but we were always close. On an overnight, somebody'd have a 14.8.
Right.
Number two would have a 14.7, and we'd have a 14.6. But we always stayed number three, and that was one of the stigmas. One thing I was always really proud of is one year I did win the Associated Press Sportscaster of the Year for South Texas. So, that's something. It's on my wall, okay? That was one of those things. I was always very, very proud of that. But you know what? Any market I worked at, San Antonio market was different. We were more of a celebrity. I don't, again, maybe San Antonio, one of those things where, the community itself looks up and loves you. You're part of our family. You're in our house, everything from the Spurs to the iguana hockey players, and I think that was kind of what it was. Just the overall sense in the community that these people on TV, they're in our house, they're our family. And I never, any other market, I worked briefly in Los Angeles. I didn't get that feeling there even compared to San Antonio, the way people just looked up to us and, thought we were really something, and,
right.
In many cases, we really weren't.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So let's get to, we're going to close it out here, but I want to get to, you get hired by Herrig, and if I'm not mistaken, you get let go by Donahue, right?
No.
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 That was Tim, right? Tim was the news director at that time?
No. Byron something was the news director, and Don, help me. Don was the general manager. He never cared for me.
Oh, that's right, because Herrig.
Yeah.
I thought Bob Donahue was still the GM.
No. He hired me. He also extended my contract 5 years. I didn't even use an agent. I just went in and I said, look, I'd like to make this year, this year, next year, and hey, maybe give me a signing bonus. And he went, okay. That was, that was the negotiation. It was very, very simple and nice. But no.
Well, I was already gone.
The new regime took over. The station sold. Things were different management styles. And, I often say through KMOL from through the 90s when I was there, that was kind of like the peak, I believe, or near the peak of just what local television was. They were the stations were making money, the product was good, this sort of thing. If it wasn't the peak, it was at a point where it dropped really hard in the 2000s, where the internet came about, and all the different streaming services and things like that. People had choices. They could watch the news or get news when they want it. They didn't have to wait till 10:25 to see Pete do sports.
Right.
No, we can look at it on our computer. We can look at it on our phone. So it was, the industry changed so much. But like at that time, we were riding high. Everybody was making money. And then, as today, all those guys you were mentioning that you worked in production, there's hardly a production department anymore. Things are automated. Things are all done on a computer. AI, these sorts of things. It's a totally different ball game compared to I want to say, at least for me personally, the heyday of television in the 90s and. Well, 2000, when the 2000 started, that's when things really started slipping.
What was the year that you were let go?
2000. I was
okay, yeah, because I was long gone by then. But I think I remember the story you telling me, or was it Danny Richardson? You walked out to throw trash out or whatever. And your picture was in the dumpster that they would normally hang in the hallway.
Kerry Garza. Yeah, the station used to have our photos.
Yeah, big ones.
Used to have our photos in the lobby.
Yeah, huge ones.
Where Emery was out there with those photos. There's our news crew. There's our anchors.
Right.
Out there, big. 18 by 30 pictures of our big face. And Kerry Garza, my friend, you worked with him in production.
Yeah.
He walked out to dump the trash, and my picture was in the trash can. And Kerry grabbed it. Kerry grabbed it and got it and brought it to me. And I've had it. I've lived in a couple of states since then. And, eventually moved back to Texas. And I had it hanging in my garage. Just that picture, because people say, why do you have that big picture of your big face like that? Well, let me tell you, I used to be this guy, So anyway, a guy was coming, he came over to my house, and he was working on my garage door. And he sees the picture on the wall. And he said, hey, why do you have that sportscaster's picture on your wall? Are you related to him? And I said, I used to be that guy. So,
well,
yeah.
we can like summarize it this way. You and Pam Bondi have something in common because her photo was thrown in the trash can too.
Yeah.
The Attorney General of the United States of America. So it doesn't matter what level you are in your professionalism, there is a trash can waiting for you somewhere.
Yeah, well, and maybe this, talking about that, we can maybe close on this one. Now, that photo was taken about 99, okay? Well, the TV station caught on fire some years ago. They had to leave that building. And after that, the station was just, broken into by homeless people, copper wire and tubing and stuff ripped out of walls. It's a total mess in there. And one of the former employees had posted on Facebook the photos of what the station looks like now. This is about a year ago. And he's posting pictures around like, look at this. Oh, this was the general manager's office. Wires are hanging from the ceiling. Things are toppled over. It's just, destroyed in there. But in the hallway was another photo of me, another framed photo from about 1994, right? And it's against the wall. Well, it's a KMOL, reunion page, the Facebook page. And several people were going like, hey, get that picture to Pete. Because he just left it there, right? He just left it there. So, yes, I contacted the man, Tom Guerrero, who's still in accounting with the company. And I said, hey, Tom, I sure like that photo. And he says, well, if I go back in there, I'll see what I can do. Well, a week or so after that, the building caught on fire again. And, and he sends me a text or an email saying, hey, well, I don't think that picture's there now. I don't think it's there now. Well, he did go back in. And sure enough, that picture was still leaning against the wall in a hallway. Who knows who saved it, why, from when? Because, again, it was several years older than the one that was taken off the wall when they let me go. somehow that picture survived a whole lot of time, 30-something years, and 2 fires. But it is also hanging now in my man cave underneath the one that was in the trash can. So, again, people ask, why do you have pictures of yourself like that? And I go, well,
you used to be a sports director.
That guy.
I think we need to dial in entertainment tonight. 30 years later, California boy makes good, goes to demise, past station burns twice, homeless people evacuated, and he still lives.
Right.
Hey, well, listen, thanks for joining us down in SA. You are one of the cool kids. We wish you all the best. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you again sometime in the future.
Thanks, Jake.
Jump behind the wheel.